Nachos amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together, talk about music, share albums with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. It's a good fun time had by all. I'm Petey Rave, and I'm in this wasteland with y'all. That is this podcast. Here with me is my tag team partners, my trio, my quadrant, I guess, my squad, my crew, my stable.
Your fellow horsemen.
Yes, my fellow horsemen. They do most of the talking for me. I just stand here and point. We have David.
Random non sequitur Record Breakers listeners.
Yes. We've got Drew.
If I'm pointing, would it be to the WrestleMania sign?
Yeah. I'm pointing to the Luna Mania sign. And of course,
we're doing that thing in like 4 months, you know? Yeah. Every year.
Don't forget that. And of course, last but not least, our guest for this batch of episodes, Roberto Villegas, aka Vincent 404.
On point WrestleMania sequitur.
Yes.
You're a couple months late.
Yes. Yeah, we're all a couple months late.
You're doing fine.
Well, you said point and then 4 horsemen. Like, what am I? Where's my?
Can I just call pestilence? Like, regardless of what happens, I call pestilence. That's yes. the only horseman I want to be right now is pestilence.
I call Ric Flair.
Yes. You all could be Apocalypse or any of the other war, famine,
pestilence.
I just want a
Ric
robe.
Flair and Arn Anderson. There you go.
Great metallic.
I want a robe.
Though Dave Mustaine wrote it.
Yes. All right, let's get it popping. Let's talk about this album that we're talking about this week. The provider of the album this week is David. David, what have you brought for the class this week?
I have brought PD Rave Record Breakers fans an album from a band from Warsaw, Poland called Riverside. This is their most recent album, and it is called Wasteland.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to say I wasn't sure what to expect myself coming into this album, but I'm definitely curious as what the expectations for the crew was. Drew, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
I had none. The only thing that I had to go off of was that the Google Music description was 7th studio album by Polish progressive rock band Riverside, and then the album cover. So I was expecting some prog that maybe leaned towards a heavier side than I got, but we'll get into that, I guess.
Yeah.
But from the album cover, I was like, oh, this is going to be like super dark and heavy, and we'll get into it.
Yeah. Roberto, what expectations did you have coming into this?
So going in, I had no idea, but so I know everyone else uses Spotify here, but I use Apple Music, and Apple Music has a tendency of putting like about pages and editor notes on everything. And so going into it, my initial thing of what it was getting into was for their About Riverside section, they basically say drawn together by a shared love of metal and prog rock. And then they go and describe the rest of the band and all the other things like that and their other works.
I'm waiting for one particular thing.
And then I get to the actual album for Wasteland. And I'll kind of crib those parts. Basically says Riverside's moody wasteland is rife with violent sounds and moments of vulnerability. It then goes on to describe each of the songs, mentions that they had lost their guitarist and founder.
There it
pronounce
is.
the name.
Yektor.
Okay, thank you, because I'm terrible with names.
Brzezinski.
And they talk about that. And the last note is this is an album about grief, acceptance, and closure, which was like, okay, I still don't know what I'm getting myself into, but let's find out.
Yeah. You definitely.
This was their first album now as a trio with studio musicians after their lead guitarist had passed away.
Yeah. And you can definitely feel that grief in the album for sure. David, how would you describe this album musically?
Riverside as a band have evolved in the same way a lot of metal bands in the last 20 years or so have evolved, where they, like myself, began heavier, and then somewhere along the lines they got infected with the progressive rock virus, as has been shown here on this podcast many, many times. And they began to evolve and become more melodic and progressive. Riverside has taken that same direction, in that probably my favorite album from them is ADHD Anno Domini High Definition, which I think is probably the best example of them blending the two while maintaining a pretty heavier direction. This album in particular I would describe as a very consciously atmospheric album. There are a lot of things on this album that Mark Studa has written that very clearly have a design that don't necessarily have a lot of heavy guitar parts, probably by conscious design and by effort. And Riverside has taken a direction that has become more atmospheric and more melodic as time has gone on. And this is, for unexpected and unfortunate reasons, the next step in that evolution.
Mm-hmm. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, as I sort of stated, I was expecting something that was much like, apparently their earlier works were very much heavier and like angrier. Ended up getting a little bit more somber. Did not read the backstory, and now that makes a lot of sense. While it wasn't like, there wasn't the heavy metal anger, like fastness that I was expecting, but it was heavy in a different sense, right? You had that somber like tone. You had sort of some parts of it that really felt like it was fading into the background, this ambient sort of tonality and use to it, which I think was really cool. But still with a lot of power behind like the guitars. There's some weird experimentation here and there. And I like, as I was reading about the band in general, there was somewhere where I read like a comparison to a band I very much enjoyed, and I sort of see where they were getting a Mars Volta comparison, where this is more taking its prog by way of metal, whereas like the Mars Volta was mixing more punk rock and hardcore. This does that with metal, but they both go into this place where like they're playing with ambience and soundscape and experimenting with those ideas and how those sorts of things can make you feel an emotion mixed in with the lyrics they're using. It's very, very dense, and has like really, really good masterful touches all throughout it. The musicianship I think is really, really great. And hearing this and finding out the story of this sort of almost being like not a send-off is not the right word, but sort of a
their drummer described this as almost a second debut album for them.
Yeah.
That's fair. And having it be that sort of goodbye to something old as they lost their old guitar player makes a lot of sense. And I would be interested to hear what he brought to the table in the old stuff and what maybe they took from that learning in the old stuff to work this in. But I think everything has a really masterful touch to the composition of it.
Mm-hmm. Roberto, how would you describe this album musically?
I mean, it's prog rock for sure, in that it's technically focused, varied in tempo, and has that musicianship to it. For me, it kind of felt a bit more folk also in execution. I don't know if I kind of got a little bit of those tones. And it might just been because of it being a dark kind of album in terms of it being this, and again, going into it, I kind of, at least because, Apple Music sort of spoiled, I guess, the whole concept was like, oh, this is about loss. And it definitely shows in the music. I don't know if it's my thing. I don't know if I'd like their other stuff more, because I tend to like a little bit more metal in my prog rock when I like it. But as far as it being like you mentioned, David, being they consider a second debut album, it definitely feels like this is something different than I've heard in terms of prog rock, and it might just be because it's so not just so dark, but it's literally like the stages of grief. Like a lot of the songs are about how you deal with losing somebody and how you go through that. And that might just be my take in terms of lyrics and hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was definitely design. It is a loose concept that is, as they described, vaguely post-apocalyptic, but it is also very much literal in the idea of surviving a cataclysmic event in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can definitely feel it in there, like that there's that sense of loss, and then like the sense of like a coming to terms, and you can definitely feel that mood in several of the tracks. But yeah, let's get down to some of the key tracks. David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I wrote Veil of Tears as a song that could go on a playlist. I also wrote it's a good song for the normies because I'm a snob. Guardian Angel is the kind of musical piece that I really appreciate when bands start experimenting with melody and more songwriting. Also, the centerpiece of the album is the title track, and I think it's very, very good. Those would be my big three.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, the day after the leading sort of intro track, just having the vocal, this very somber forefront way to open, I think, plays off the Wasteland motif really, really well. The way the reverb hits that vocal, I think, was really, really pretty. Veil of Tears. I wrote down here this song in particular, I felt like is something that could make a breakthrough. Like it's something that could like get like a lot of eyes on a band like this. Very, 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 very quickly. It has the depth to it, like all progressive rock bands on all their songs are going to have, but it's just simple enough that it doesn't like, you don't have to live inside a world of breaking down an album every week from track to track, to get to where it's going to. The chorus drop as well on it, is really, really cool. The heavy verse to like twinkly chorus, I think I'll never really get sick of that because I'm a simple man. And then the struggle for survival. It's a 9.5 minute long song. 9.5 minutes can be a lot of time. But there was so much variation to this that in part of it, you're like, wait a second, did we switch track? Oh, wait, no, we didn't. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
And also the instrumental like section bit of the song allows this movement to the piece that I think is really like a cool symbolism for like the album as a whole and how it sort of plays out.
Mm-hmm. Roberto, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I mean, every other track is said, but I guess like for me, the standout track, and I don't know if it's because it's the last track and because it's kind of a piano, it might be that, but I loved The Night Before. Because for me, because a lot of the songs we talked about, mentioning like in terms of dealing with death and whatnot, and I always felt like listening to that song, it being kind of piano, it's entirely, it feels different than every other song on there in terms of that, but maybe because it's the one instrument. But the thing I loved about it was that even that, it was still haunting compared even with all the previous tracks, and even that's that. But two, what I liked about it was it did kind of feel like the closing kind of thing, and it I know it's the last song and it should be the kind of closing song for an album, but it probably was my favorite song on the album for that. If I love pianos, but in terms of just just this like haunting kind of melodic melody. I know that's repetitive to say melodic melody, but it felt eerie in a whole album that felt eerie. You know?
Yeah, and I think that all works well. I mean, you all kind of like touch on the songs that really stand out. I mean, the day after, it just starts off setting the mood fantastically. Just the lead singer, Marius Duda. Just his voice setting the mood right off the bat. No accompaniment. Is really fantastic, and the way it kind of like transitions out into like this like ambient sound, and then transitions over to Acid Rain, which kind of like just does a fantastic job, kind of like setting the pace for the rest of the album. And like Guardian Angel, the thing was talked about before, that acoustic guitar and the piano, it does so much in being effective. It's kind of like just hooking me. Just that song hooking me with just the tone and the feel of that acoustic guitar and the piano working together, and it's just fantastic. Let's bring it back around the horn, talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album as a whole?
This was an album that, while I got something very different than I expected, obviously it was something that like gave me exactly what I wanted in a weird way. This is, I think I've brought Mars Volta on before. I'm pretty sure I brought Deloused a while ago.
Yeah.
That's because like when I go into the more proggy side of things, I like it to be a bit experimental. I like it to be a bit weird. I like it to be a bit like soundscapey at times. And
Drew, I would recommend the Riverside album that came out right before this, Eye of the Soundscape.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So it's something that like that type of thing I really, really dig on. Like laying back and letting like the story and the concepts and the weirdness and the music sort of wash over you, and letting musicians just be crazy because they can, I think is really, really a lot of fun. And it's something that this album brought every second of, and I was super, super happy to be about it. So if that also seems like it would be up your alley, I highly suggest it.
Yeah. Roberto, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
So this is a hard one because I am usually on the fence when it comes to prog rock. Either I really like it or I don't like it. I can say that while this is...
You said that you would have leaned towards something heavier.
Well, the thing is, I don't know if it all depends really, because like there's certain things I respect the idea of making an album like this. I respect the idea of as a group coming to terms with losing not only a member of the band in a way, but also losing a member of your family. Because I'd imagine that this group is like that, or at least it comes off with the album. So I respect having that. I also respect the idea of doing experimental stuff too. A lot of times what I think it was for this, it might have been too dark for me, or I just wasn't in the mood to hear that kind of dark execution. But knowing that story and knowing what went down, I would not have expected this to be a happy-go-lucky kind of prog rock album, or even a metal kind of thing. I definitely would like a little more.
The album's Second Life Syndrome might be what you're looking for.
Okay, I will definitely check it out, because again, I can't. It definitely is technical. It definitely is. There is musicianship. I can respect that this is something of quality, and it comes from a place of honesty and authenticity. It just might have not been it's just not my thing, at least then. But I can definitely say, like, if you want if you're in the mood for something a bit darker, or want to have sort of this musical album about grief and how you deal with that, and what that means in a prog rock sense, I would definitely say check this out.
Mm-hmm.
Just be ready for that, though.
Yes. Yeah, I think overall it is really cool in how it is very somber. It's very like weighty. It's very like it's very grief laden. But I think it's effective. It's effective in kind of unpacking those thoughts and those feelings and allowing the musicians to put their heart out on the tape, put their heart and soul onto the master recording, and put it out there in a musical release, and have people share in their feelings. And I think it works well. It's well made. It's well executed. It has a lot of gripping moments musically, and it's really engaging. And I think it's definitely an enjoyable ride. I don't know if it's an always have on or always going to be part of a playlist in the future, but definitely like you said, there's more to Riverside to explore. So this is one great example, and I look forward to checking out a couple of the other albums when I set aside time for it. So I look forward to that. But last but not least, David, how would you conclude about this album?
I like dense albums like this. I like when something I listen to says, "Oh, you think you're just gonna go right on to the next thing? Nope, get your ass back here." And that's what I got from this. Like it, I don't want to say forced me to give it a few extra listens, but I really didn't want to feel like I was missing anything. The ambience of the idea that this is a band that now does not have a guitarist, and the only person that is doing guitar parts is the front man with the riffs and the melodies and a few guest guitar solo spots here and there. That's not lost on me. The very tone of the entire album from start to finish is not lost on me. The concept, the lyrics, the mood that it is trying to convey, I think it is a very, not to get too pretentious, but say important vibe to convey. I think a lot of times in music, this emotion of mourning and moving on is not conveyed very well. And I think this album does that. As someone who has recently dealt with a death, this was pretty close to hitting the mark. And I think it's really well done. Also, Riverside is a band that I've really liked over the years. In their entire album catalog, it might be my second favorite now to ADHD. And I'm really happy with it. And when something like this happens to a band that you enjoy, but they are able to move forward musically in such a way that is satisfying, it's a positive that comes out of a big, big negative. And I have high hopes for the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we look forward to their future as a group. It's a fantastic band. Let's get down.
Marius Duda using the low register of his voice for the first time was pretty awesome.
That's cool. Yeah, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's get down to the main event of the evening. We'll get to our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up in poetic format.
Oh, I thought the main event was Brock versus Roman. Okay, sorry.
No, not this time. Brock is. We couldn't. He's busy.
Please don't say his name in my presence.
Ronan?
I think we all hate him.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno. Drew, what is your haiku?
Prog with hints of underlying metal love, sitting Riverside.
Mm-hmm. Roberto, what is your haiku?
Super dark prog rock. Not exactly my jam, fam. But if it's yours, cool.
Yeah. My haiku. Somber and heavy, with atmosphere aplenty, it gets the job done. And David, last but not least, what is your haiku?
Out of tragedy, Riverside spins pain and loss, strongly moves forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Check out Riverside. Wasteland is going to be on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. I forgot last week to say that. Yeah, on that Spotify playlist will be next week's album, and it will be provided by none other than Drew. Drew, what have you got for us next week?
Well, this is a band that I think, because of the leader sort of wanting to, use his ears for his other musical projects, maybe ended a little sooner than it should have. But a band from the 80s that I really, really enjoy. And I'm going to do their album with all the hits. So we're going to go with Oingo Boingo and Dead Man's Party.
Yeah.
Drew, can we make sure that you come all dressed up with nowhere to go?
Yes. Look forward to that next week. It's going to be a fun discussion, but that is next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Drew is at XJuciferX. Roberto is at Vincent404. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. If you want to email us, Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube.
Share, subscribe.
Like, share, subscribe.
Hit that
Reviews,
bell.
Do the things. Find us where you find podcasts. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Until next time.
Fighting.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.